This is Alex Mercer, broadcasting on frequency 9.17 FM to anyone still out there listening. 3 months. It's hard to believe it's been that long. Harder still to accept that the world before, the one with morning commutes, buzzing cities, and blinking streetlights, has become nothing more than a memory we revisit when nights run too long. The new normal is quieter, much quieter, not peaceful, just empty. The silence hangs in the air like a heavy fog, broken only by distant wind, creaking metal, or the occasional groan carried from the outskirts. Most of us used to find comfort in quiet. Now every moment without sound feels like the world holding its breath, waiting for something to move in the shadows. Communities across the region have adjusted to this new rhythm. Settlements sit where life used to happen: parking lots, abandoned gyms, school courtyards. People wake before sunrise, not because they want to, but because sleep rarely lasts more than an hour or two at a time. You can hear the shuffle of boots at first light as survivors line up for water, cooking fire rotations, or the latest supply check. Scavenging teams gather around maps patched together from road signs and scribbled notes, planning their routes like delicate surgical procedures. One wrong turn, one detour into a dead neighborhood, and they may not return. Still, every day they go because someone has to. Curfews are strict now. The settlements enforce them not to control people, but to keep them alive. Once the sun dips behind ruined skyline, the infected grow more active, drifting closer to warmth and sound. So doors are barred, fires dampened, whispers kept low enough to blend with the darkness. Night patrols walk the perimeter armed with whatever they can find: crowbars, spears made from broom handles, a handful of bullets saved for emergencies. They listen, they wait, they pray the fence holds. Water collection has become part of daily life, too. Survivors travel in pairs to the river or whichever broken pipe still drips, filling containers before boiling them over rusted stoves. Every drop is precious now. I've heard some settlements have created rotation charts, 2-hour shifts that ensure nobody risks dehydration or overexertion. It's strange how quickly the body adapts to rationing, how quickly the mind learns not to complain. Emotionally, well, that part is harder to explain. Even for those who appear strong, the weight of these months is carved into their faces. People speak less, stare longer, and give half smiles instead of real ones. Some have stopped reminiscing about the past because it hurts too much. Others cling to stories of home like lifelines, repeating them around campfires to keep themselves human. Parents do their best to shield their children from the truth, though the kids see more than adults think. Some whisper about nightmares. Others pretend they don't have any. Every settlement has its quiet moments, those strange, numb pauses where everyone stops and just listens to the world that used to be theirs. It's during those moments you can feel the emotional toll hanging over everyone. Fear has become a constant companion, grief an ache that doesn't fade, and the loneliness, it settles into your bones like cold. But there's something else too, something unexpected. Survival has become routine. People who once panicked at the thought of darkness now walk through night with calm determination. Those who couldn't imagine living without electricity now light lanterns with steady hands. Communities share meals, laugh softly when they can, and pull together when someone is hurting. It's far from the life we knew, but it's life. And for many, that's enough to keep going. This is the world now. Curfews, scavenging rotations, water collection, and the slow, stubborn rebuilding of human spirit. Maybe this isn't the normal we asked for, but it's the one we've learned to live with. And as settlements grow, survival alone isn't enough. People need structure, rules, some kind of order to hold on to when everything else has fallen apart. 3 months in, governance, if you can even call it that, has taken on many shapes across the region. Some communities try to rebuild the world they lost. Others, well, they've created something entirely different. In the larger settlements, councils have formed, small groups of elected survivors who meet every morning to discuss food rations, patrol routes, and disputes. They sit around makeshift tables made of broken doors and scrap metal, arguing about what little resources remain and how to keep people from breaking under the strain. These councils offer transparency and hope. Every voice is meant to matter. Every decision debated. It's slow, it's messy, but it's democratic. And in a world like this, that matters. But not all communities choose that path. Some have turned to dictatorships, whether by fear or by necessity. When the outbreak began, a few strong, armed individuals rose to the top and never let go of that power. In these places, one voice dictates all rules, curfews, punishments, ration amounts. Some leaders genuinely believe they're protecting their people. Others, they've let authority twist them into something cruel. Desperation pushes people to obey. Hunger keeps them silent. And the infected aren't the only monsters outside the walls anymore. Trials for crimes have become a tense part of life. When someone steals food, breaks curfew, or harms another survivor, the settlement must decide the punishment. In the council-run communities, these trials resemble the old world. Witnesses, discussions, decisions made collectively. People plead their case, tears often falling as they talk about starving children or fear-driven mistakes. Sometimes they're forgiven with warnings. Sometimes they're exiled to the wasteland. In the harsher settlements, justice is swift. Public beatings, confinement, forced labor. There's no room for mercy when resources are so thin that kindness feels like risk. And then there are the power struggles, quiet at first, but growing louder by the day. Militias have expanded throughout many communities. What began as small groups of volunteers guarding the perimeter have evolved into armed forces with structure, hierarchy, and influence. Some view them as protectors. Others fear they're becoming the real power behind the scenes. Civilians argue that decisions should remain in the hands of elected members, while armed groups insist they're the only ones keeping danger at bay. Behind closed doors, deals are struck, promises made, threats whispered. Rumors travel between settlements like drifting embers. Stories of coups, of councils overthrown by their own guards. Stories of leaders who vanished after making unpopular decisions. Stories of survivors choosing to abandon their homes rather than live under fists instead of laws. What's clear is that the idea of government has fractured. Every settlement is an experiment, some thriving, some collapsing, some rotting from the inside. This is the governance of the ruins, a world where law depends on who holds the food and who holds the guns. And every day, people must decide which version of leadership they can live under and which one they might eventually have to fight against. If you're listening, pay attention to the power shifts in your area. A community is safest when its people still remember how to be human, even when the world forgets. More updates coming soon. I've been getting reports from scouting teams traveling beyond the settlement lines. They say the cities, the once bustling downtowns we used to complain about for their traffic and noise, are silent now. Not the kind of silence you find late at night, but the hollow, unnatural kind that settles over graveyards. Highways leading into the metropolitan areas are almost unrecognizable. Vines creep over the asphalt, weaving through shattered windshields and wrapping around rusted bumpers. Cars sit frozen in eternal gridlock, their owners long gone, their doors left open as if the world paused mid-escape. Some vehicles still have headlights wired to dying batteries, flickering weakly like the last heartbeat of a dying beast. In the city centers, buildings have collapsed under months of neglect and fire. Entire blocks are charred ruins where flames once raged without firefighters to stop them. Ash drifts through the air like gray snow. Scavengers walk these ruins carefully, stepping over twisted rebar and melted signs, always listening. Because even in their broken state, the cities aren't empty. The infected wander between the skeletal remains of towers, shambling through the dust-filled light leaking in from shattered windows. Sometimes the fires still smolder beneath the rubble, heat radiating up through the cracks like the earth itself is wounded. But the most disturbing part isn't what you can see, it's what you can hear. Survivors say that when you stand between the skyscrapers, even the smallest sound echoes like a scream. A single pebble kicked by a careless foot ricochets off the empty glass towers in a haunting metallic ring. And then there are the moments when wind whistles through open floors and broken elevators, producing a low moaning sound that mimics the infected. Scouts have told me it's nearly impossible to tell the difference. Sometimes they simply stand still, holding their breath, unsure if they're listening to the wind or something that's about to step out of the shadows. The cities have become their own kind of predator, silent, watching, waiting. But while the cities decay, the settlements grow. And out of necessity, people have begun exchanging more than food and supplies. They've begun exchanging knowledge. Survivors are rediscovering skills long forgotten in a world that once relied on machines and convenience. Farming has become a cornerstone of survival. Patches of soil behind barricades now hold rows of vegetables tended by hands that once typed on keyboards or served tables. People are learning to rotate crops, compost scraps, and gather seeds from whatever edible plants still grow wild. Some settlements have even begun teaching old-world blacksmithing, using scavenged metal, car parts, and broken tools to create new weapons, hinges, and cooking instruments. The spark of a forge fire has become a symbol of resilience. Water purification has become another essential craft. Boiling alone isn't always enough, so survivors have turned to sand filters, charcoal layers, and improvised distillation rigs. What used to be scientific trivia, something you'd see in a survival documentary, has become life-saving knowledge shared in evening workshops. Doctors, nurses, and medical students now hold classes too, teaching civilians how to stitch wounds, splint broken bones, and recognize infections before they become deadly. Without hospitals, every person must learn a little bit of medicine. Every settlement needs at least a handful of healers. Bartering has shifted too. It's no longer about trading canned food for batteries or blankets for fuel. Now people trade skills. A farmer teaches a guard how to plant winter crops in exchange for self-defense lessons. A mechanic repairs a broken generator in exchange for someone showing him how to identify edible wild plants. A former chemistry teacher offers water filtration lessons and gets a set of reinforced boots in return. Skills are currency. Knowledge is gold. And the more each settlement learns, the more hope they're able to carve out of the ruins. The world has changed. The cities stand silent, swallowed by nature and haunted by the infected. But in the shadows of that devastation, humans are teaching each other, rebuilding each other, and slowly, very slowly, remembering how to survive without the world we once took for granted. I want to talk about something many settlements have been struggling with, something that's taken more lives in the past few weeks than the infected themselves. The collapse of modern medicine. Before the outbreak, we lived in a world where solutions were just a pharmacy visit away. Antibiotics, insulin, inhalers, painkillers. Every town had shelves full of miracle solutions we no longer appreciated. But now those shelves sit empty, dusty, silent. And the world has been forced to remember what it looks like when common illnesses become death sentences. Reports from various camps tell the same story. Infections from minor cuts turning lethal. Fevers that used to be manageable now burning unchecked. People with diabetes slipping into comas because there's simply no insulin left. Diagnostic tools are gone too. No labs, no imaging machines, no tests that can confirm what's killing someone. Doctors are left guessing, doing the best they can with only their eyes, ears, and experience. The surge of preventable deaths has broken the morale of even the strongest survivors. A sprained ankle, a tooth infection, a bad flu, things we once shrugged off, are now deadly events the entire community must rally around. And in the absence of modern drugs, settlements have turned to makeshift remedies. Herbal medicine, once dismissed as old-fashioned, has become vital. People brew teas from pine needles for vitamin C. They mash plantain leaves into salves for wounds. Willow bark is shaved down and boiled for pain relief. Every new remedy is learned through trial, error, and desperate experimentation. Some treatments help, some don't. But humans, by nature, keep trying. Every night you'll see small groups gathered around fires with bundles of leaves and handmade pots, sharing what little knowledge they've gained from the wilderness around them. Then there are the field surgeons, heroes working with nothing more than grit and improvised equipment. They sterilize scalpels over open flames, stitch wounds with fishing line, and use old belt buckles or wooden sticks as splints. They're exhausted, trembling from sleepless nights, and haunted by the weight of every life they couldn't save. Some were professionals before the outbreak, doctors, nurses, paramedics, while others were thrown into the role because no one else knew what to do. They operate in classrooms, storage closets, or tents dimly lit with lanterns. It's medicine at its rawest, stripped of all comfort and certainty. And yet somehow, people survive. Not all of them, but enough to keep hope alive. But on the other side of this medical collapse, something else has emerged in the ruins. Factions. Groups with clashing philosophies, different visions of what survival should look like, and how humanity should rebuild, or whether it should rebuild at all. Settlements talk about 4 major factions known across the region, each carving a piece of this broken world for themselves. The first are the conservers, the closest thing we have to the old world spirit. They believe in rebuilding civilization brick by brick, saving what knowledge they can, preserving books, tools, seeds, and medical techniques. Their camps are organized, cooperative, and often overcrowded because they refuse to turn away those seeking refuge. Their strength is unity, but their mercy makes them targets. Then there are the raiders, the antithesis of everything the conservers stand for. These are survivors who've embraced chaos, living off what they steal and using violence as their first language. They take supplies, weapons, and people, burning whatever they don't need. Some are thrill seekers. Others are broken souls convinced the old rules died with the old world. Their camps are mobile, brutal, and known for striking without warning. Entire settlements have vanished after raider attacks. Nothing left but scorched earth and scattered bones. Next are the isolationists, communities that want nothing to do with the outside world. They shoot on sight, trusting no one but their own. Their borders are lined with traps and handwritten warnings. They believe that outsiders bring danger, disease, or betrayal. In their eyes, the best chance of survival is remaining hidden, silent, and fiercely independent. Some admire them for their discipline. Others fear them for their ruthlessness. And finally, the pilgrims, nomadic wanderers driven by hope or desperation, depending on who you ask. They travel constantly, believing in rumors of distant safe zones where the government still functions, where medicine exists, where the world is rebuilding in pockets of order. They follow old radio recordings, faded maps, or whispered stories passed between camps. They don't stay long in any settlement, offering news and trade before moving on. Some say they're chasing ghosts. Others say they've seen things the rest of us can't imagine. These factions, each with their own ideals, strengths, and flaws, are shaping the world in ways none of us expected. The infected may be the immediate threat, but the future of humanity, that depends on which philosophy survives the longest. We've received unsettling reports over the last few weeks, and they all point to one thing. The infected aren't the same creatures we first encountered at the beginning of the outbreak. After 3 months, the virus is changing, evolving, and the infected are evolving with it. What once felt predictable, something we could study and adapt around, is becoming something new, something unstable. Survivors living near forested regions have noticed that the infected move differently depending on the temperature. Cold weather slows them down, sometimes drastically. In freezing conditions, they barely move at all, drifting into a sluggish, statue-like state as if the cold is choking the virus inside their bodies. But in heat, the opposite happens. Scavengers have described infected racing through sun-baked vehicles or sprinting across cracked asphalt with unnatural bursts of speed. It's as if high temperatures ignite something inside them, pushing their aggression to the edge of frenzy. Entire settlements have begun reorganizing scavenging patterns around the day's temperature. Cold mornings are safer, sweltering afternoons are deadly. But temperature isn't the only change. Some infected are mutating. Scattered reports mention new behaviors, some moving faster than anything documented before, closing distances in seconds, others showing flashes of unsettling intelligence, avoiding traps that used to catch them by the dozens. A few survivors claim they've seen infected quietly stalking instead of mindlessly charging. Whether that's evolution or desperation, we don't yet know. In certain areas, nocturnal variants have appeared, emerging only after sunset with reflective eyes that glint like an animal's. They cling to darkness, vanishing into shadows the moment light touches them. And then there are the territorial ones, infected that remain in one area, circling it with almost purposeful pacing, attacking anything that enters their invisible boundary. Scientists, those still alive anyway, are trying to understand what's happening. Some are working from makeshift labs set up in storage units or school basements, trying to analyze samples collected by brave volunteers. They describe the virus as unstable, constantly shifting under a microscope, refusing to stay consistent long enough for meaningful study. A few researchers believe environmental stress is accelerating mutation. Others say it's adapting to humans, learning from how we evade it, adjusting itself to counter our survival strategies. They're performing tests with the most basic instruments, hand lenses, scavenged microscopes, chemical kits barely holding together with duct tape. But there's fear among them too. Fear that these mutations aren't random. Fear that the virus is outpacing us, gaining the upper hand in a battle we barely understand. Some scientists have stopped trying to cure it, and instead focus on predicting its behavior, mapping migration patterns, noting regions where aggressive variants cluster, examining the effects of climate on infected activity. They're gathering every scrap of data, hoping to keep settlements one step ahead. And still, the infected continue to change. Every encounter feels like a new chapter in a nightmare that refuses to end. Survivors must stay observant, adapt quickly, and share information whenever they can. Because whatever humanity is becoming in these ruins, the infected are becoming something else too. And if we fail to understand them, we may not survive the next phase of this evolving plague. Updates incoming. Stay tuned. I've talked a lot about the physical dangers out there, the infected, the weather, the shortages. But tonight, I want to talk about something quieter, something heavier, something most settlements are facing, but rarely speak about aloud. After 3 months of loss, fear, and constant survival, the real threat creeping into our camps isn't always outside the fences. It's inside the human mind. Trauma has begun to sink its teeth into survivors in ways we didn't see during the early chaos. Back then, adrenaline carried people through the screams, the sirens, the panic. Now that routine has settled in, the shock has worn off, and the emotional cost of everything we've lost is beginning to hit with brutal force. I've spoken to groups across different regions, and the patterns are the same everywhere. Survivors are developing phobias, intense, debilitating fears they never had before the outbreak. Some have grown terrified of the dark, unable to sleep unless they're surrounded by lanterns or fires, even if that means risking attracting infected. Others fear tight, enclosed spaces after being trapped during initial outbreaks. They refuse to enter basements or abandoned cars. And then there's the strangest one, the fear of silence. People who can no longer stand the quiet because the quiet reminds them of death. They sleep near generators or keep broken radios humming static just to fill the void. Survivor's guilt has become another silent epidemic. Almost everyone has lost someone. Family, friends, neighbors, complete strangers they tried but failed to help. I've heard stories of people who replay the same moment of regret over and over. If I had moved faster, if I had gone back, if I had opened the door, if I had taken a different route. Those thoughts eat at people like acid. They're not wounds you see, but they bleed all the same. Some survivors blame themselves for living. Others believe they don't deserve to be here at all. Small cracks in the mind widening into fractures that threaten to break them. And yet, in this darkness, humans still reach out to each other. Across many settlements, makeshift therapy circles have begun forming. Quiet gatherings of all ages who sit around fires or inside dimly lit classrooms and talk. Not officially, not professionally. Just people helping people survive the weight in their chests. Some circles are guided by former counselors or teachers. Others are led by whoever has the courage to speak first. They share memories, fears, confessions. They cry. They laugh bitterly at moments of dark irony. They hold hands when the stories become too heavy. And sometimes, they simply sit in silence together. comforting each other with presence alone. These circles don't fix everything. They don't bring back the dead or erase the nightmares, but they remind people that they aren't facing this apocalypse alone, that every heart still beating in these ruins is carrying its own scars, and sometimes knowing that is enough to pull someone back from the edge. If you're listening right now, whatever fear you're battling, whatever guilt is clawing at your insides, you're not the only one. The world may be broken, but you don't have to break with it. I've been hearing from settlements across the region over the past week, and one thing has become painfully clear. 3 months in, survival isn't just about food, water, or avoiding the infected anymore. People are searching for each other, for family, for friends, for anyone who might remind them of the world before the outbreak, of the lives that once made sense. Search parties are forming in every corner of the territories, still clinging to some semblance of life. Sometimes it's a pair of siblings, holding flashlights like fragile beacons in the dark. Sometimes it's a group of 10 or 12, armed, cautious, walking in formation as if every shadow might be a trap. Some go out at dawn, hoping the light will hide them from the infected. Others at night, moving quietly under the cover of darkness to avoid factions that might not welcome strangers. The rumors are relentless. Survivors held by raiders, families cornered in abandoned factories, people hiding in empty towns claimed by isolationists. Stories that sound too cruel to be true but too plausible to ignore. Every abandoned home tells its own story. Notes scrawled on walls, children's toys left behind like ghostly markers, broken doors swinging in the wind, handprints in dust, footprints in mud, a single piece of clothing hanging from a fence. These become the breadcrumbs that searchers follow, and each clue carries its own heartbreak. Some point to life, others point to tragedy. Every detail matters because in this world, missing someone can mean death, and finding them can mean hope. And the emotional toll, it's unlike anything else. Survivors have recounted moments that are almost unbearable to hear over the airwaves. Parents stumbling into alleyways to find children they thought gone forever, collapsing into each other with tears and relief in equal measure. Friends meeting again in burned-out stores, clinging, sobbing, laughing, unable to believe the other is real. But not all stories end like that. Too often, search parties arrive too late. Houses they enter reveal only dust, or evidence that someone has been taken, sometimes by the infected, sometimes by a faction that didn't care for mercy. Journals and letters discovered too late become bitter reminders of what can never be undone. Entire streets stand empty, lined with echoes of lives that vanished in silence. Despite the danger, the searches continue. Each journey is meticulously planned. Maps marked with old signs, signals left at crossroads, notes etched into walls for those who follow. Settlements have begun sharing information, coordinating with each other where possible. Safe houses, rumored sightings, roads cleared of infected. Scouts describe streets once bustling with cars and people now overrun with weeds, abandoned cars, and the occasional fire smoldering in the ruins. Every trip is a gamble. The infected lurk, smarter and faster in some areas. Factions may respond violently to trespassers. Yet the need to reconnect drives people forward, past the fear, past the exhaustion, past the certainty that some of what they'll find won't be good. And in that persistence lies the raw, fragile humanity that survives this apocalypse. People risk themselves not just for survival, but for memory, for connection, for the faint hope that somewhere, just beyond the ruined skyline, a hand waits to be held. Every reunion rekindles a spark of light in settlements that feel like they've been swallowed by darkness. Every devastating discovery teaches communities how precious time and life are, and how quickly both can vanish. And every search party that sets out into the ruined cities, abandoned highways, and shattered neighborhoods carries more than weapons. They carry stories, hope, love, and the unspoken determination that we refuse to forget each other, even when the world itself seems determined to. 3 months in, the basics of survival, food, water, shelter, remain critical. But the deeper fight, the one that keeps people moving through haunted streets and burned out homes, is the fight to reclaim connection. Because no matter how long the infected roam, no matter how much society has collapsed, humans are searching for one another. We are, in every sense, seeking what makes us human, piecing it together from the ruins. Updates are coming. Listen closely, because the stories we share now may be the roadmaps for those still searching. Across the settlements I've been in contact with, one thing is becoming clear. Humans refuse to be isolated. 3 months in, the collapse of communication has made the world feel smaller and larger at the same time. Smaller because fear and danger are immediate, pressing, suffocating. Larger because everyone knows there are others out there, but connecting with them feels impossible. And yet, despite the shattered infrastructure, survivors are trying. They're building, improvising, and pushing signals into the void, hoping someone, anyone, is listening. Old radio towers, the skeletons of the pre-outbreak world, are being patched together with whatever parts survivors can salvage. Copper wire stripped from abandoned buildings, car batteries, salvaged antennas. The ingenuity is remarkable. In some settlements, groups of engineers, former ham radio operators, or just anyone willing to learn, have spent days climbing towers, reconnecting transmitters and fighting static that would have been a nuisance in the old world, but now feels like the difference between life and silence. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But every crackling signal carries hope. Even a single moment of coherent voice over the airwaves can lift the morale of an entire settlement. Morse code has made a comeback, faster and more reliable than spoken transmission in the static-heavy conditions. Simple sequences of dots and dashes, tapping out messages across miles of empty roads and overgrown terrain, connect communities that might otherwise think they're alone. Settlers describe the thrill of hearing a familiar sequence for the first time in weeks. A single SOS, a series of numbers, a familiar name. It's like a heartbeat stretching across the wasteland. Some groups have even begun maintaining informal schedules. A set time to broadcast, a time to listen, a time to leave a signal if they have news or warnings. Patterns emerge, rhythms of survival, small networks that pulse like fragile veins in a world cut off from everything else. And then there are the rumors, half-whispered and hard to confirm, of government broadcasts. Faint signals picked up at odd hours, some scrambled, some barely audible through the static. People speak of messages instructing survivors to gather in certain locations, or offering guidance on safety zones and supply caches. Others say it's a trap, or just interference or remnants of old recordings being repeated. But the fact that the possibility exists is enough to keep people listening, searching, and hoping. It drives long-distance scouting missions, inspires risky trips to abandoned relay stations, and sparks debates over who should go, who should stay, and how far the settlements are willing to trust a voice over the airwaves. These attempts at connection are more than just practical. They are profoundly human. Every repaired tower, every tapped-out Morse code message, every faint government broadcast is a declaration that humans are still here. That even in a world overrun by the infected, by factions, by ruin and isolation, we refuse to be completely cut off from each other. We're creating lines, threads, lifelines that stretch across empty highways, burned-out cities, and shadowed forests. Each message is an act of defiance against the silence, against the fear, and against the impossible odds stacked against us. The world is fractured, yes, but the signals remind us that it isn't gone. Not yet. I've received reports from across the region over the last several days, and the picture emerging is grim. 3 months in, the early scramble for survival has given way to something darker: the resource wars. Food and water, once taken for granted, have become deadly commodities. Farms, once empty fields, are now battlefields. Survivors are clashing over arable land, fighting for the ability to grow crops that will feed their families through another week, another month. Entire settlements have erected barricades around small patches of soil, patrolling them day and night. Raiders, organized, violent, and relentless, descend on these areas with the precision of armies, stripping the fields bare before anyone can react. And even when fights don't break out, the constant tension is palpable. People glance at neighbors with suspicion, wondering who might take what in the dead of night. Water, too, has become a contested resource. Rivers, streams, and surviving purification setups are frequently targeted by desperate or aggressive groups. Settlements have reported coordinated raids on water filtration stations, sometimes by factions we know, other times by strangers with nothing to lose. Wells that used to serve 50 people now must serve hundreds, stretching the limits of patience and engineering. Every day brings the ethical dilemmas we never imagined facing. Do you turn away starving strangers to preserve your own food supply? Do you share your water and risk running dry, or hoard it to protect the settlement at the cost of morality? These aren't abstract questions anymore. They're life and death decisions made every day in the ruins of our world. And in the midst of these wars over food and water, a new population is rising. Children born into chaos, or forced to adapt to it. Kids who once would have been in classrooms, playgrounds, or birthday parties are now learning survival before they can even read. They are carrying weapons, learning to defend themselves and others, and observing the harsh rules of this new world with a clarity that no child should ever need to have. Some settlements train them rigorously, teaching them to handle firearms, recognize danger, or perform first aid. Others watch as orphaned or feral children form their own groups in abandoned buildings in the forests or along highways. These children learn fast, communicate in signals and gestures, and survive in ways that would have shocked the world 3 months ago. The combination of scarcity and danger is reshaping them. Kids who lose parents to starvation, to infected, or to raiders develop survival instincts almost instantly. They become hunters, scavengers, and sometimes leaders. Some communities report that these children organize patrols of their own, scouting nearby areas for food, water, or signs of life. They form packs, often with no adults at all, moving silently and efficiently. And though some of these children cling to the faint remnants of innocence, many adopt a pragmatic ruthlessness, learning early that hesitation can be fatal, that trust is a risk, and that survival sometimes requires decisions that no child should ever make. I've heard stories that will haunt me. Children as young as 8 who successfully defend a food cache from raiders using traps they built themselves. a group of orphaned teens who navigated a burned-out city to reclaim a water purification rig, quietly avoiding infected and factions alike. Others, tragically, who have been lost in those same cities, claimed by hunger or by the infected. Their trauma is raw, unrelenting, and yet it shapes a generation that understands the rules of this world before many adults do. They are learning to adapt emotionally and physically, forming a culture born entirely from necessity. The resource wars and the rise of children surviving in these conditions are intertwined. In areas where scarcity is most severe, children are both the most vulnerable and the most capable. They witness ethical choices made by adults, decisions to turn someone away, to defend food, to negotiate with hostile factions, and they internalize these lessons. Some carry guilt, others carry determination. Many carry fear and anger, but they all carry knowledge. And in this world, knowledge is survival. Settlements that take care to educate and protect them see extraordinary resilience. Those that do not often lose children to the dangers that surround them. And yet, even in this darkness, there are sparks of ingenuity and hope. Some children are learning medicine alongside adults. Some teach younger siblings to farm, to cook, to purify water. Some form protective groups that patrol settlements, helping defend weaker members. These acts of leadership, strategy, and bravery are astonishing because they emerge in response to necessity. They remind us that even in a world defined by scarcity and fear, humans adapt. They evolve. They survive. The resource wars are far from over. Water will remain contested. Crops will continue to be guarded. And ethical dilemmas will keep testing the limits of communities. But the children who have learned to navigate this new world, are carrying lessons forward, shaping the settlements, and in many ways, redefining what it means to survive. They are a new generation of witnesses, fighters, and sometimes even heroes, forged in fire, starvation, and fear. And as brutal as it is, as heartbreaking as it can be, there is a strange sort of hope in seeing them endure, learn, and even thrive amidst the chaos. I've been hearing stories from the edges of settlements, from wandering scouts, and from the few radio signals that manage to crack through the static. People are talking about something they call a safe zone. At first it sounded like a fairy tale, a story survivors tell each other around campfires to keep despair at bay. A place with working electricity, running water, stocked pantries, medicine, even whispers of a vaccine. Some say it's a government facility untouched by the chaos. Others insist it's a self-sufficient community that somehow survived in perfect secrecy. And some warn that it may not exist at all, that the safe zone is a myth, a lure, or worse, a trap. And yet, despite the warnings, people are moving. They're walking into the ruins, into the forests, along highways where the infected have claimed the streets, because hope, fragile, fleeting, desperate, is still driving humanity forward. Pilgrimages have begun. Small groups of survivors set out with little more than what they can carry on their backs. A few cans of food, a half-broken rifle, a map drawn from scraps of old data, and a heartbeat full of hope. Some leave before dawn, creeping along crumbling roads, overgrown railways, through forests that have reclaimed abandoned suburbs. Others travel at night, using the shadows to shield them from the infected and from hostile factions that wait behind barricades or abandoned checkpoints. Along the way, alliances are formed in moments of necessity, only to crumble under pressure, hunger, or fear. Strangers trust one another long enough to share a meal, a water bottle, or information. But trust is dangerous. Supplies vanish, people vanish, sometimes both. And when someone disappears, the consequences ripple through the group. Paranoia spreads, tempers flare, and what little cohesion existed can unravel in an instant. The myth of the safe zone carries risks beyond the infected. Rogue factions are drawn to travelers, eager to exploit the desperation that drives them. Some factions masquerade as welcoming communities, offering shelter and supplies, only to trap pilgrims when they least expect it. Raiders and isolationists alike have learned to play with hope as a weapon, guiding survivors into ambushes, or leaving them stranded with no supplies in the middle of infected territory. And still, people go. They walk into danger willingly, driven by the faintest chance of refuge, of reunion, of reclaiming even a fragment of the life they lost. And yet, while the human spirit pursues safety, the world itself is changing in ways we hadn't anticipated. Reports from scouts, scientists, and even survivors passing through the ruins indicate that the infected are evolving at a terrifying pace. Some are faster, stronger, and increasingly intelligent. Others move with coordination that suggests strategy rather than instinct. Entire packs have been observed setting ambushes, isolating targets, and seemingly learning from each encounter. Survivors who once thought empty streets were safe now describe the sensation of being hunted, of every shadow potentially harboring an enemy that adapts and anticipates their moves. Animals, too, are becoming part of this evolving threat. Deer, stray dogs, crows, creatures once considered harmless, have begun showing signs of infection or carrying the virus mechanically. Witnesses describe packs of animals moving with unusual coordination, sometimes leading survivors unknowingly into infected zones, other times attacking without warning. Even a simple walk through a forest can now carry lethal risk. The rules that once governed the infected no longer apply. Every step outside settlement walls is now a test of vigilance, intelligence, and luck. Then there are the new highly aggressive variants. Scouts report creatures that charge with terrifying speed and coordination, targeting groups rather than individuals, and herding survivors into deadly traps. Some show territorial behavior, guarding ruined buildings, supply caches, and intersections like predators defending their dens. Encounters with these variants often leave survivors shaken, sometimes broken. Entire search parties have disappeared, leaving nothing but evidence of struggle, trampled ground, broken weapons, and signs of a brutal, strategic attack. These are no longer mindless monsters. They are hunters, evolving faster than we can comprehend, and they force every human decision into life or death territory. And yet, even with all this, the myth of the safe zone continues to drive movement. Some groups report glimpsing lights on the horizon, smoke from chimneys, or the faint hum of a generator in the distance. Each signal is a spark, a lure, a possibility. Pilgrims follow these signs across miles of ruin, sometimes finding a settlement, sometimes finding nothing but empty streets and abandoned homes. The journey is a crucible. Every day brings a test of endurance, resourcefulness, and morality. Food runs low, injuries occur, and tensions flare. The alliances made at dawn can fracture by dusk. Betrayals are common, not always from malice, but from desperation. The collision of hope and evolving threats has created a world where survival is as much about mental resilience as physical skill. Pilgrims must weigh every choice: whom to trust, when to fight, when to hide, and when to push forward despite exhaustion. The infected are adapting. The environment is shifting. Factions are unpredictable. And the safe zone, whether real or a legend, is both a destination and a mirror. It reveals the limits of trust, the depths of desperation, and the lengths humans will go to hold on to the idea of a better world. In the end, these stories, the searches for safety, the encounters with evolved infected, the betrayals and alliances along the way, paint a clear picture. The apocalypse is not slowing. It is learning. It is teaching the world to be dangerous in ways we barely understand. And those who chase myths of safety may discover that the world itself is now a predator, that hope can be both salvation and trap, and that the difference between survival and oblivion may depend entirely on who can adapt fastest to a world that has changed forever. 3 months into this nightmare, the challenges survivors face are no longer just physical. They're moral, ethical. Every choice has consequences that reach far beyond the immediate moment, and the weight of these decisions is crushing. Communities are no longer debating abstract ideals. They are forced to live them, to embody them, to confront them in ways the world never prepared anyone for. And time and again, the apocalypse strips humanity down to its rawest, most elemental state, exposing both the darkness and the light in each person. Some of the hardest decisions involve the infected, especially when they are loved ones. Parents, siblings, partners, friends. People have had to make choices that would have been unthinkable just months ago. Reports from settlements describe the gut-wrenching moments when someone has to execute a family member who has turned, not out of malice, but to protect the rest of the group. The sounds of confrontation, the sobbing, the prayers whispered in the shadows before the act, leave scars deeper than any wound inflicted by the infected themselves. Survivors speak of the surreal clarity that comes at these moments, a mixture of horror, sorrow, and the strange, quiet necessity of survival. It is ethical collapse at its most intimate, personal, and painful. And yet, survival is not solely about what must be taken away. It is also about what must be shared. Medicine, food, and resources are limited, and deciding who receives them can feel like arbitrating life and death. Communities are facing choices that would have been unimaginable in the old world. Who deserves treatment first? The elderly with a shot of insulin, a young mother with a fever, or the one who is the most capable of helping the settlement survive? These decisions weigh heavily on every council, every guardian, and every person with influence in the community. The arguments are intense, the tension palpable, and the consequences unforgiving. Every choice leaves someone grieving, someone angry, someone questioning whether humanity is worth saving. And yet, amid this collapse of morality, there are moments that defy expectation. Compassion emerges in the most unlikely places, often from the people least expected to show it. A teenager sharing half of a meager ration with a stranger. A guard diverting attention so a group of children can escape an infected pack. A survivor hiding a pregnant woman in a makeshift bunker, despite the risk to their own life. These acts are small, fleeting, and often unnoticed by the wider world, but they carry immense weight. They are the threads of humanity that refuse to break, even when the world seems determined to strip it away. They are moral awakenings, reminders that even when everything has fallen apart, people can choose to protect, to nurture, and to uphold what is good. The collapse is not uniform. Some communities spiral into ruthless survivalism. Theft, betrayal, and violence become tools of necessity. Factions exploit scarcity, enforcing draconian rules that punish dissenters or outsiders. But other settlements strive to maintain principles, creating councils, establishing rules of fairness, and offering sanctuary even when it strains resources. The contrast is stark, and it forces every individual to reflect on who they are when the world itself is testing every boundary of morality. Psychologists, where they still exist, call this a moral crucible. Survivors report dreams haunted by the decisions they've made, visions of hands that held a weapon too long, of faces they couldn't save, of meals they shared or withheld. Some carry guilt that cannot be erased. Others carry pride, the quiet affirmation that even in collapse, they chose kindness over cruelty. Communities have begun informal counseling sessions, storytelling nights, and reflection circles, where people talk about what they did, why they did it, and what they hope to do differently tomorrow. These rituals do not erase the trauma, but they offer a chance for growth, for clarity, for moral recalibration in a world that constantly challenges it. And here's the paradox. The same apocalypse that forces people into acts of unimaginable cruelty also gives rise to extraordinary compassion. Every life saved against impossible odds, every act of kindness in a world built on fear, every choice to uphold morality even when the cost is high, becomes a statement of defiance. It is proof that humanity, while fragile, persists. That even as society collapses under the weight of scarcity, violence, and loss, the capacity for ethical action, no matter how small, remains alive. It is the foundation upon which survivors build not just shelters and barricades, but the hope for something more enduring than mere existence. The ethical collapse is everywhere, and it touches everyone who survives. But so does the awakening. Survivors are learning that morality is not a luxury, it is survival. That compassion can be as powerful a weapon as a gun, as vital as a rationed meal, and as necessary as clean water. And in these moments, when the world is at its most brutal, humanity is reminded that its true strength lies not just in endurance, but in the choices we make, and the courage to make the right ones, even when everything else urges us to do otherwise. Reports are coming in from the northern settlements, and the message is chilling, literally. Winter is approaching. The first frost has already touched the ruins of towns that were once bustling with life, leaving roads slick with ice and abandoned cars frozen in place. Temperatures are dropping faster than many expected, and with the cold comes a strange, eerie advantage. The infected themselves begin to freeze. Scouts describe streets lined with figures, motionless and encased in ice, twisted mid-step or mid-lunge, as if the cold has turned them into statues. On some nights, when the moonlight glints off frozen hands and faces, it is almost beautiful, almost peaceful. Until you remember that the virus waits beneath the ice, dormant but not defeated, ready to reanimate when warmth returns. It is a temporary reprieve, a window for survivors to move, to act, to prepare, but one that closes as soon as the thaw comes. Survivors are racing against time, stockpiling food, gathering firewood, and reinforcing shelters have become urgent priorities. In towns where winter is arriving early, rationing has become a daily ritual. Groups trek through snowdrifts and icy streets, scavenging abandoned stores, homes, and vehicles, hoping to gather enough supplies to see them through the harsh months ahead. But the cold brings new dangers. Hypothermia strikes quickly, sometimes before the infected even have a chance to find you. Frostbite can claim a hand, a foot, or an entire limb. Settlers huddle together in makeshift shelters, sharing body heat and whispering plans for survival. Every day is a careful calculation. Stay warm, stay fed, stay alive. And it is in these dire conditions that we see both the best and worst of humanity. Some communities band together, pooling resources and labor to keep everyone alive. Others fracture, driven by desperation. Fights erupt over firewood, blankets, or even small caches of preserved food. Decisions that would have seemed impossible in summer. Who gets the last can of beans? Who guards the food stockpile? Who is sent to risk a night outside? Become brutal necessities. The cold magnifies scarcity, intensifies fear, and forces people to confront mortality in a way nothing else has. But then, hope begins to emerge, fragile and flickering, like the first light of dawn after a long night. One settlement reported finding a working generator hidden in the ruins of an old warehouse, scavenged from the remains of a pre-outbreak power facility. The hum of electricity through the wires was enough to lift the spirits of an entire community. Lights flickered on. Heaters warmed frozen rooms. Radios crackled with static and voices once again. And the generator is more than comfort. It is a tool, a lifeline, a symbol that even in the dead of winter, humanity can regain some control over its world. Further north, a scientist working with a small group of survivors has made a discovery that could change everything. Antibodies have been found in a rare few individuals who survived the initial outbreak with minimal infection. These survivors show remarkable resistance to the virus, and early tests suggest their blood could hold the key to treatment, perhaps even a vaccine. Laboratories cobbled together from school chemistry rooms, abandoned hospitals, and makeshift field tents are humming with cautious excitement. The idea that we might not be entirely powerless against the virus has ignited a new sense of purpose, giving survivors something more than just survival to fight for. Meanwhile, reclaimed farmland is showing signs of life. Settlements that had struggled for months in empty lots and ruined city blocks have begun to cultivate the earth again. Fields once choked with weeds are now furrows of green shoots, carefully tended by survivors who have learned to adapt, to improvise, to nurture life in a world defined by death. The harvest is small, fragile, but it is enough to provide hope that food scarcity may one day ease and that communities can sustain themselves beyond scavenging and raiding. And in a signal that has electrified both hearts and minds, long-distance communication has reconnected two cities for the first time in months. Messages now travel through patched-together radio networks, Morse code signals tapping across the ice-covered landscape. Survivors speak to each other again. They share knowledge, coordinate supply runs, warn one another about threats, and offer words of encouragement. The sense of isolation that has defined the past months begins to crumble. Humanity is rediscovering itself, not just as individuals fighting to survive, but as communities capable of connection, cooperation, and perhaps even rebuilding. Winter brings danger, frost, and scarcity, yes, but it also brings clarity. In the frozen streets, in the silent nights, in the communities huddled together for warmth, there is a renewed awareness. Survival is no longer merely about enduring. It is about learning, adapting, and reclaiming what has been lost. The virus may be relentless, the factions may be ruthless, and the world may remain broken. But in generators humming to life, in antibodies discovered, in the first shoots of farmland rising from the ruins, and in voices connecting across cities once cut off, hope is taking root. And sometimes, even in the harshest cold, that is enough to keep people moving forward. After months of survival in the ruins, of scavenging for scraps, defending what little remained, and weathering the relentless threats of the infected, factions, and the elements, some communities are beginning to think beyond mere existence. For the first time in this long nightmare, reports are coming in of settlements attempting something bigger, something audacious, rebuilding. Not just small repairs or makeshift shelters, but true projects aimed at restoring a semblance of normal life. It is tentative, fragile, and deeply human. A declaration that even amid devastation, people refuse to surrender their future. One settlement, deep in the northern valleys, has undertaken the monumental task of constructing defensive walls around the town. Using scavenged wood, metal sheets, and concrete from abandoned buildings, the survivors are building a perimeter that is not just physical, but symbolic. Teams work tirelessly, often from sunrise until long past dark, hammering, lifting, and reinforcing the structure. Scouts patrol the surrounding forests, ensuring that the frozen infected or roaming raiders do not disrupt the effort. There is exhaustion, and there is fear, but there is also a remarkable sense of pride. Each plank nailed in place, each reinforced gate, is a statement. We are here, we are strong, and we intend to stay. And while the walls may never be perfect, their construction has given the community a renewed sense of control over their destiny, and for many, a measure of safety they haven't felt in months. But the rebuilding isn't just defensive. Survivors are daring to restore the institutions of society itself. In the same town, a school that once echoed with laughter is being transformed into a central hub for community life. Classrooms are being cleared of debris, desks realigned, and blackboards repurposed as information boards and planning stations. Volunteers, young and old, carry supplies, repair plumbing, and patch broken windows. Children return cautiously, their steps hesitant but hopeful, guided by adults who teach them not only survival skills, but also reading, arithmetic, and the simplest forms of structured learning. The act of restoring education is more than a practical measure. It is a declaration that life, in all its complexity and beauty, will continue. Elsewhere, a group of survivors has set their sights on a water treatment plant long abandoned after the outbreak. Engineers, former municipal workers, and anyone with knowledge of plumbing and machinery are painstakingly repairing pumps, clearing filters, and reconnecting pipes. It is slow, methodical work, punctuated by setbacks, frozen pipes, scavenged components missing, and equipment long rusted from neglect. But with every valve turned, every filter replaced, every pump whirring to life, there is a sense of triumph. Clean water flows into storage tanks once again, giving the settlement not just a critical resource, but renewed hope that the infrastructure of civilization can rise from the ruins. And the psychological impact of these projects cannot be overstated. Survivors report a shift in mood, a lifting of despair. The act of rebuilding, of creating rather than merely defending, is invigorating. People are working together with purpose, sharing skills and knowledge, teaching each other in ways that were unnecessary in the pre-apocalypse world, but are vital now. Leadership structures solidify around these projects, councils forming to allocate labor, manage resources, and coordinate defenses. Tensions remain, disagreements flare, exhaustion frays nerves, but there is a common goal binding the community. Survival is not enough. They want to thrive. Stories of innovation and improvisation abound. Teachers repurpose blackboards into solar panels tracking charts. Mechanics rig generators to power pumps and lights. Farmers experiment with vertical gardens in classrooms. Every step forward is measured against risk. The cold, the infected, the scarcity of supplies, and the ever-present threat of rogue factions. Yet, despite all these challenges, progress continues. Every repaired wall, every flowing faucet, every classroom filled with children's voices is a testament to human determination. Perhaps most remarkable is the sense of continuity these projects create. In building walls, repairing hospitals, or restoring schools, survivors are reconnecting with a world that existed before the outbreak. It is a world of order, community, and purpose. And while the virus and its horrors remain, these projects are proving that humans are capable of more than endurance. They are capable of creation. They remind us that even when the apocalypse has stripped life down to its barest essentials, the desire to rebuild, to improve, and to imagine a future is indomitable. Stay tuned for more updates on these rebuilding projects. And remember, each wall, each repaired pipe, each classroom restored is more than survival. It is a declaration that humanity is not finished. The future, uncertain as it is, can still be reclaimed.